Hi everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp, and I'm sure you know what game I'm currently playing for review, but also we played a few other games over the last few weeks, and I thought Beyond the Ice Palace 2 might be one you're interested in. Now, the original was released in 1988, and that was available on the Commodore 64 and potentially on Amiga. This time around, Storybird Studios and P-Cube and Pixel Heart for the physical have teamed up to bring us the resurrection of this frozen relic for a modern audience. This entirely new game features many of the original mechanics and stylings, but does it manage to break the ice with new ideas or end up leaving us out in the cold? Yes. Not bad, not bad. Well, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. The narrative then continues the dark fantasy themes of its predecessor. You get to play as the Cursed King. He is the fallen ruler and he's been bound in chains and eventually manages to escape using those chains as his weapon. The story setup is relatively cliche, it works well, and gave me minor Soul Reaver vibes. Unfortunately though, it doesn't go as deep as you might like. You will meet a variety of different characters in the world, but that story mainly exists as a backdrop for the action, rather than a particularly compelling tale to push you forward, although it is clear exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, so I guess it falls somewhere in the middle as to why you are stomping on so many skeleton heads. Beyond the Ice Palace 2's gameplay does stick to its classic action platformer roots, and you might wonder, is this a Metroidvania? Well, I did wonder the same thing myself. Initially it doesn't feel like it is, but new mechanics are introduced and you soon realise it does have some of that DNA, while in my opinion veering more on the Castlevania side. You wield those chains which double as weapons as well as a grappling hook, and it is satisfying to knock down enemies and finish them off with a stomp on the head lest they make their way back to their feet. But both Glen and I felt that platforming precision isn't always on point. For example, jump to a ledge, great, no problem, the character grabs on and up you go. Or you might use the dash mechanic and double jump to get there. However, sometimes the character just seemed to not fancy holding on. It was unusual and it's difficult to describe, but it gave it a clunkiness where you're always second guessing if your actions were going to be carried out. The same feeling pervaded the grappling hook, which is one of the game's biggest and most important mechanics. Not only is it used in the platforming, it's also used on certain boss fights. And that's where the wheels of it really came off. You'll point in the direction you want it to go, fire it off, and really hope that it's going to land. Then you're swinging yourself around, but the momentum of this doesn't seem quite right. And you can perform almost a grapple pull that will launch you in the opposite direction that your character is currently swinging. I'm sure you can probably see just from the gameplay itself that when using that, there is an element of the sporadic about it. It's a system that could have benefited from a visual lock-on indicator so that you knew before you push the button where it was going to land. You do get to grips with it eventually and you figure out the other movement quirks, but they all play into a feeling of imprecision. The combat itself is actually okay. You've got a dodge mechanic that allows you to slow down time if you can perform it at just the right moment, and then parry attack the enemy. Some bosses will require more heavy use of this than others, and depending on how you get on with that type of timing, well, that will affect how you feel about it. Personally, I thought it was fine, but usually that kind of mechanic gives you a very powerful counter attack that makes it feel more worthwhile. Here it ends up being used more to dodge unblockable attacks, or just to put you in a better position during a boss fight. Now, there are several checkpoints throughout the game. Some of them are red, some of them blue, with the red ones directly transporting you to the hub area and they'll teleport you straight back to that point, while the King's Thrones that you find have a couple of purposes. Yes, they all save the game when you sit on them, but you can also upgrade using gemstones. You'll either find those, purchase them from the shop, or gradually build them up by locking components together. The upgrade paths should be very straightforward. This is another area I think the developer Storybird Studio could have refined a little. Now the reason, where are you going to put your first point? Well, I might put it into strength, is that STR? Yeah, that's got to be strength. What about that one? Okay, that probably does that. How about this one down here? The problem is it's all very vague. You can move the node across and see what each of those categories does, but realistically, as you hover over each, it should give you a little description in the corner, and the actual title of each should be in full. One thing I really liked about Beyond the Ice Palace were the environments. I think the level design is actually quite strong. There are lots of hidden areas, there is a sense that you're moving across a vast kingdom, and while they do tackle a couple of tropes, they introduced pirates earlier on, and of course you've got more skeletons than you can shake a stick at, it is an enjoyable world to work your way through. Throw into that mix quite a few hidden areas and the unlocking of a few new skills like the double jump, which will allow you to reach new areas or go back and 100% the game. There is some content to go back for in what is a more linear, slight Metroid experience. You're not working your way through a map, looking at the next place you should go to. It generally follows a left to right pattern, with the occasional things like keys to find and treasure rooms to unlock, adding in some variety. Boss fights come in both mini and full-sized forms, each with a health bar, and some of them are really outstanding. They look great. There's this spiky hedgehog early on that looks incredible. Sadly though, that one in particular relied on the use of that grapple mechanic far too heavily, which exposes the flaws in that very early on. Others though were well designed, but never really reflecting the true challenge of the original game release. Now, the mini-bosses I found quite erratic. These pop up and they can be clones of each other. You might fight the same one a couple of times. They won't have a health bar. And honestly, I don't know how else to say this, they just look a little bit janky. They're these small little creatures following a 1 or 2 move sequence, and it's just a rinse and repeat until they're done. While it might sound like I didn't enjoy Beyond the Ice Palace 2, I actually do. It's a good game. It reminds me of the early release of Ganryu 2, which ended up being much better after a few patches. I don't think this is quite the case here. I don't think it's the core performance or anything like that that's the issue. It's those gameplay decisions, but it is still fun if you like this style of game. However, it doesn't do enough to stand out in what is such a rich field. It's just decent when it comes to gameplay, and that scores 14 out of 20, whereas the controls, they lack a little. They score 12 out of 20. Visually, this one is a bit of a treat when it comes to that pixel artwork. It has multiple layers, parallax scrolling, as well as some unique foreground elements like cave entrances that dynamically seal up as you pass through them. The animations as well are generally strong, and hidden areas do encourage exploration, particularly those that make creative use of the grappling hook. Performance-wise, things are running at a smooth 60 frames per second on the Switch with no crashes that we encountered. However, and this is a big deal for some players, screen shake is excessive and there is no way of turning it off. I know for a fact, just by having read the comments over the years, that is going to be a deal breaker for some players. The fact that Glen and I actually tried to turn it off goes to show that it was that overt. You do eventually get used to it, but I think it is definitely worth me mentioning here. But those visuals and performance are excellent. Overall, this section scores 16 out of 20. Alistair Brimble, a British composer renowned for his extensive work in video game music since the mid-1980s, has, in my opinion, done the best element of this release, and that is the soundtrack. Now, he's most notably known for his work on Alien Breed, one of my favorites of all time, but even things like the Roller Coaster Tycoon series, Driver, some of the Sonic games. He's literally done it all over the years, and it's his musical score here that was a real standout to my experience. While it isn't quite Castlevania tier, it is excellent. The music carries a moody, atmospheric quality, with some of them being particularly memorable. Overall, I give the audio 17 out of 20. Priced at £16.99 or your regional equivalent, the game does offer around 4 to 6 hours of content, which you could push to around 8 if you really want to go for 100% completion. There's no way around it, it's on the shorter side for what it is. It's always nice to see a physical available, I've got to be honest, and you can find this one as well on PlayAsia. We've got a link to that in the description if you want to pick it up that way and save a bit of money. But overall, I would score value 12 out of 20. Beyond the Ice Palace 2 is a decent return to a long dormant classic, but it doesn't quite push beyond its roots. While the visuals, music, and the mechanics provide some highlights, the overall experience just didn't stand out for me against stronger genre competitors like Ender Magnolia or even Blade Chimera. If you're nostalgic for the original, then I don't think you'll be disappointed, but for most people it would be one they'd grab on a sale or as a physical collector. A good game for sure, if not great. it gets a SwitchUp score of 71%. Yeah, so let me know in the comments, is this one you had your eye on? Do you like the look of it? And what are you currently playing? I'm going to record the sales video now. Have a lovely weekend and I will catch you on Sunday. Thanks to our Patreons and members, all of you that like to save yourself a bit of bunts over at switchup.gg, where you can get 5% in cashback for all things Switch all the time. Keep it Switch Up. Cheers guys. See ya!